All right, I think I'm ready. Hi, everyone. It is the 21st of November, 2024. My name is Luke Thomas. This is episode 229, I think, of my live chat. How are you doing? Thank you so much for joining me. I greatly appreciate it. Let's see, on the docket today, well, not tomorrow, I should say, Saturday morning, local time-ish, there's going to be UFC Macau. The UFC is returning to that gambling mecca of the world. There's a good main event. Card is up and down, but it's got some gems on it for sure. So we'll talk about that if that's on your mind. There's actually a lot of Mike Tyson, Jake Paul leftovers because even yesterday I got texted by a friend sending me that video I'm sure you've seen circulating where Mike is allegedly holding his punches and people are like, it's a conspiracy. And I'm like, he's shot to pieces. Actually. But anyway, we'll talk about that if you want to get to it. Plus, there's still a lot of UFC 309 stuff. Like those events were big. They're kind of lingering to a degree. So we'll get to that. Plus, also, did you guys see Jair Bolsonaro indicted for allegedly trying to attempt a coup in Brazil? Boy, that's going to make your favorite Brazilian MMA fighter very upset today, this news. You know, they love them some Bolsonaro. And you can see, God damn it, I trimmed my beard a little bit. And now it's getting onto my goddamn jacket. So let's see if I can open it up a little bit, make that a little less awful. Good Lord, that's terrible. All right, well, it is what it is. You guys know the drill. We'll go for about an hour on the free questions, and then we'll get to the paid. If you want to get to the paid portion, you can fire those into the super chat, unless you're a member, in which case you can do that for free. We appreciate everyone who likes, who watches, who subscribes, who hits the notification bell, everything. And without further ado, let's get this party started, shall we? There that is. You guys know the deal. All live programming on this channel is brought to you by, you know that, Tooletries. They got a new graphic for me today. Check this out. If you can't read it, I'll read it to you. It should be visible, obviously. Black Friday sale still going on. We haven't even reached Black Friday, but Black Friday sales are upon us. 40% off site-wide. We'll take a look at that here in just a minute. 40% off site-wide. And I'll just throw this one right on top of it. Check that out. LT15 for an additional 15% off. So you can get 40% off site-wide, everything they own, on Tooletries.com. Then on top of it, you can fire in this code right here, LT15 for 15% off. And buddy boy, you are rocking and rolling. What can you buy among many things? How about this bad boy, the shearer? You guys know the bit. Here it is. Look at this. I mean, it just doesn't come much better. Waterproof, 7,000 RPM motor, ceramic blade at the top. It's rechargeable with USB-C. It's got LED lights so you don't start trimming parts you're not supposed to. Excuse me. It's got trim guards and, of course, a travel lock so that when you put it in your bag, it doesn't go in your bag like some of those other things might do. In any case, Tooletries.com, LT15 for that. Tooletries.com, LT15. Plus, right now, as I mentioned, Black Friday sale going on. Combine the two, and you have to pay less than the normal price. Less than half the normal price. That's a pretty good deal. Tooletries.com, boys and girls. Get it done. All right. With that out of the way, it was quite the weekend last weekend. Thursday was a big show here. Friday was a big show with the Paul-Tyson thing. Then 309 was big, and then I hadn't been sick all year. Now I had that weird thing on my leg, but suffice to say, I didn't have a respiratory illness. How about that? I hadn't had a respiratory illness all year, but the bug, whatever bug it was, it finally got me on. Well, you guys heard me complain about symptoms actually on Saturday night, but Sunday was in full speed. So I've been sick Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then today I finally felt kind of like myself for the first time. It's been a bit of a slog, but doing pretty good. All right, that's enough of a preamble. Let's get this party started, shall we? Let's get these questions going, and then let's answer them. I'm going to have my Dr. Pepper Zero Sugar in my tiny little can. All right. Let me refresh this, and then let's get to it. By the way, let's fire this up here. Oops, excuse me. Let's do it this way, and then in the back end, I'm going to freeze it. This number here, 252, I think for a live chat, this is like, I mean, I've obviously gotten more, depending on what I post, you can get more or less than that. But for like questions for a live chat, that might be the most I've gotten like ever. It's a lot. All right. Let's see here. First question. It seems like incorporating more Long Island Luke into the show has improved the dynamic between you and BC on air, made it more positive. Do you agree? I mean, I would generally say having him on the air has been great no matter what, in part because he's like a degenerate gambler, and that's actually pretty good for the modern landscape of sports conversation. I mean that quite sincerely. I mean, maybe he's not degenerate, but, he's an active gambler. And I think that's good for the show. I definitely think he brings some balance to the force, so to speak. So, yeah, big fans of Long Island Luke. And then perhaps the dynamic you're referring to as well. I mean, there's just a lot of benefits by having other people in the MK universe get a microphone. A little harder to cook up each week than you might imagine. But having him there as a consistent presence, I think, has been nothing but generally a pretty big positive for sure. Let's see. All right. Look, with Netflix's technical disaster last week, do you think UFC, NFL, scheduled on Christmas Eve, by the way, yes, WWE adjust the numbers in their negotiations and question the whole thing? NFL does, according to news reports. Netflix show that despite all their might and scope, they're not technically ready for for special sports nights. Didn't they have an issue with another show too that was live? It wasn't the Tom Brady roast. It preceded that. It was, I think, like a previous season of like a Love is Blind or some other kind of finale they had that was supposed to be live programming that also tanked when they tried to show it. I can't remember the name. I could be making that up, but I feel like that's right. In any event, you're simply asking about the Paul and Tyson event. Again, I'm not sure how much is negotiable, like what is written into their contracts about what can be done in terms of changing the terms from a monetary standpoint. I understand that there might be some in the media that's reported to that effect, but you're asking about WWE. I mean, this is a level of contract negotiation or level of contract specificities that none of us really have. That's unusual, but of course the NFL is the 800-pound gorilla in television altogether, but so is Netflix, right? So what I would say is, like, what you're basically asking is like, what level of panic do they have? I mean, maybe I can go to that, and I would actually say probably not that much. Netflix has they fucked this up real bad, but Netflix has an enormous amount of resources. They have more resources than basically any other streamer and maybe even other television provider, aside from like major telecom companies. You know what I mean? Like, they have just an outrageous amount of money. They have an outrageous amount of cultural cachet. Like, they're going to be able to recruit people who worked engineers and everybody else to come and work on these projects of theirs and in-house. Like, their lawyers are going to be good. You know what I mean? Like, every level of what they do is going to be good. And obviously what that they turned in on this night was unacceptable, but I would actually argue that's going to be like good information about what they can tolerate and what they can't. Also, I think they had something like, how many American homes did they have? 30 million plus. That is something that they could tolerate, right? That's about what you might get for an NFL game. You might get a little bit less depending on the game, but they also had a worldwide audience at the same time that would not be tuning in, right? Are they going to get consecutive 100 million households to watch an NFL game? I don't think so. I just don't perceive that as likely. 100 million in the States is what they get for the Super Bowl, 110, 120 million. So certainly it's a cause for some concern. Certainly if I was at the NFL or I was at WWE, I think my first question would be, what would it take? Like, reassure me this won't happen for us. What upgrades and technical server capacity might you need? What are the things that are missing between now and then that you can fill in? And what is the level of demand expectation relative to what you got? There's plenty of reason to think that they'll be just fine. This is not, I don't know. This is not, Tubi or Fubo or some shit. Like, and these are different services. I understand they're not actually quite apples to apples, but you know what I mean? Like, if anybody has the resources to fix it, it is Netflix. And again, it won't be the same amount of demand. So I would be, if I was WWE, I wouldn't worry at all. And if I was NFL, I would certainly have some concern, but not really. Okay. Great question, I think. Jon single-handedly within 309 fight week has promoted Tom into a monster while making himself and his current heavyweight belt significantly less relevant by talking. The very fact that he fought washed Stipe and his dominant but not mauling performance against a washed fighter, although Jon fighting Tom would still add a lot of legitimacy to the belt, regardless of who wins, for Tom's legitimacy has become significantly less important in the public eye because Jon religiously repeated for a week that he doesn't want to fight Tom for this reason or that, and because Jon is now less than he was aura-wise. I mean, what the fuck does... Guys, I understand there's a nebulous concept of like people looking cooler than other people, but we're starting to do this thing where like we're actually taking it seriously as like a thing you can measure. You know what I mean? What are we doing here? What are we doing here? This is astrology. Like let's talk about things in real terms if we can at all. All right, thank you. Anyway, Jon has diminished his heavyweight belt and his own aura. Okay, while elevating Tom's. After the past week, should Tom get the undisputed title without fighting Jon, it'll feel much more legit now. Do you agree? Fuck no, I don't agree. No, okay. You're asking, so here's what I don't agree to. Over the past week, should Tom get the undisputed title without fighting Jon, it'll feel much more legit now. I don't agree with that at all. No, you got to take it from a guy. This is a, how do I say this exactly? A unification for a title is not something like a peaceful transfer of power. That's not what this is. You got to go in there and smash and grab. Like it should be in an ideal circumstance, it's a, I don't know if I want to say robbery gone wrong, but it needs to be contested. It needs to be contested. Okay, so there's a bunch of premises baked into what you're talking about here. First of all, has Jon's aura diminished in some way? I don't even know what to say about this. I mean, yes, does he look quite the invincible juggernaut at the peak of his powers? No, he's not that. But he's still a relevant force. Obviously, he's the heavyweight champion. He's still a big attraction at the box office. People will absolutely want to see him fight again, even if it is Poatan or, maybe not Jamal Hill or something like that. But certainly for those two guys, there's going to be a big demand. And yes, I don't think that what Jon has accomplished at heavyweight is nearly as impressive as what Tom has accomplished at heavyweight. But I don't think that Jon has like diminished the value of the heavyweight belt to the point where it's now not even worth having them fight anymore. Having them fight could not be more important than it is now. Like there's nothing that up to this point, we've never been in a place where it's been more important. It's extremely important, in part because you now have clarity. There was all this bullshit about like, well, they already booked the Stipe fight. And I'm like, guys, they change opponents for people all the time. But okay, putting that aside, that's done. That's done. There is no more obstruction other than what they can or can't come to. But like, there's no other fight that has to happen before this one. And you just kind of have to watch and let it go. Like, that's done. It's done. Listen, guys, a couple of things are being measured here that are informing some of the judgment around this question, which I think was asked in good faith. So I appreciate it. But let's get to some of the sort of nuts and bolts of it. Jon looked good on Saturday. He did not perform poorly. Jon has so much baggage around him and does things on fight week, and especially now, whether it's part negotiating, part trolling, part poor PR management, part just, he's just going to say what he wants to say and let the chips fall where they go. However you wish to interpret it, all of that, plus all the baggage that comes with him, a guy who they moved event for on a week's notice, who ruined UFC 200, and the list goes on and on and on. There's just a lot of baggage around him. And so it makes any kind of condemnation or praise full of this like mixed weird reaction that you can't quite tell. Like, why are people being so angry at him when you should be happy? And why are people so happy with him when people actually should be kind of angry? And then you get this confused admixture that just doesn't really, it makes it hard to parse what's actually happening here. Jon did not look bad. Guys, you had a heavyweight finish off another heavyweight. Again, you would probably say Stipe could still beat on his best day even now someone inside that top 15. At first, I thought no one. Then you look at like there's Waldez Acosta, and they're like, okay, yeah, he could probably beat somebody like that. But, you had the guy fighting him, a heavyweight, leaving both of his feet and spinning to finish off a guy. Then in the first round, hits like a variety of an Asotogari, to throw him to the ground and then pin him and maul him there. Like, guys, like, that's not common at heavyweight. It's not common. Like, he fought well. You have to say that. Like, you have to say that. He does things from a technical perspective that are both advanced and acrobatic. That's not common. Even Stipe at his best wasn't doing stuff like that. Now, of course, Stipe had a different style. What I'm pointing out to you is that is special enough, even against the corpse of Stipe Miocic, that you have to respect that. You have to respect that. I'm sorry, you do. You just do. And so you can acknowledge that while also saying Stipe was a fucking corpse on Saturday. I mean, I didn't really, I knew there was a drop off, but then when I went back and I watched some of the fights on the train ride up on Monday from Stipe versus JDS 1 and 2, and there's a bunch of them I went through. And I was just like, holy shit, it's a completely different guy. Like, just the body language. You heard Matt Brown say something similar. By the way, guys, I spent the last week kind of going back and forth with like various coaches and various other people I know in the game. And, you know, most of the consensus that I've heard is that Jon is definitely very, very good. He's the guy, certainly with the belt, and he performed very ably and in quite important aspects, like very well. But he also fought a fucking corpse. He fought a fucking corpse. Like, that's just the reality. Like, I'm not trying to be dismissive of Stipe, but that version of Stipe where he can barely get excited to fight the very best guy who's maybe ever done it and can barely move. Dude, like, go back and look at like one of his sort of probing kind of baiting attacks is this inside cut kick off open stance. He does it all the time. Go back and look at other fights where he does it. Even then, there's a little bit of like zip and pop to it. He barely flicked it out like he was, you know, trying to get a dog sleeping on his foot, like a small dog sleeping on his foot, just kind of, you know, chuck him to the side a little bit, like barely moved it at all. It was weird. You know, he fought a corpse. Like, that's just the reality. And so you have to ask yourself, like, what the value is of that win. This is something we're going to get to tomorrow on MK. Like, if you had to actually rank all of Jon's title fight wins, where do you actually rank the Stipe one? Because I think where you rank it, like, people got bitter at me when I was like, the win doesn't, if your legacy is built off of these kinds of wins, that kind of win doesn't add anything. I mean, it doesn't add like nothing, obviously. It adds a little something, but anything meaningful, no, it adds nothing meaningful. It doesn't. If your resume is built off of the kinds of things that Jon's built off, how the fuck is beating this version of Stipe, like, is that one of his top wins? It's not even one of his mediocre wins. You know what I mean? It's one of his much lesser title fight wins. You know, that's somewhere around like Anthony Smith or, you know, Thiago Santos or, you know, even Reyes. And even then, I don't know that it's on par with that. Those are much more like live dog opponents. Now, Stipe's got a bigger name and did more than those guys. But, you know, in terms of like the difficulty of the challenge, like what was the actual value of that in terms of a technical challenge? Anyway, the point I'm trying to get to here is you say, after the past week, should Tom get the undisputed title without Jon fighting Jon? What it did was waste everyone's time. I agree. But to me, we got a much better look at Jon. He seems feisty and in certain ways in denial. He still has a ton of ability left. He has slowed down a little bit. I think that's totally fair. Slowed down, excuse me. I think it's totally fair to say. The point I'm trying to make is for all of the different contexts involved here, dude, Jon fought well and looked good, and in a huge part because Stipe was a corpse, and also part because he still got a lot of life left in him. Tom needs to fight that guy. Tom needs to fight that guy. Like, just being like, oh, Jon's lost his aura, just give Tom the belt. No, I say no. I say you got to take it off of him. That's what I say. And Tom wants the opportunity. So no. It's a long sort of way of getting to it, but no. What if Turki Alashikh, Big Turkey, is interested in the Jon Jones versus Aspinall fight? Can that happen? All right. So this is actually a very interesting question. I would imagine he would have interest in doing that. A couple problems with that. Can they afford it? Obviously. UFC can afford it. I mean, UFC can afford it easily. I have seen people toss out figures of like 30 million, 40 million, 50, whatever, you know, just going on and up and up and up. And people being like, oh, they can't afford that. They could easily afford that. They could easily afford that. No problem. But sticking with their guns that they're, you know, have traditionally adhered to, they're not going to pay that, right? It's not a question of can they afford it. It's just a question of will they do it? And they probably will not do it. Turkey from Saudi Arabia, they can obviously afford it. This is not a question of do they have the money. But if they're going to pay for the money or pay whatever would be the difference, some complications arise. Because if you're Turkey and you want that fight, they're going to want that fight in Riyadh, right? In all likelihood. Now, you might say they just did the UFC or Noche UFC fight at the Sphere in Las Vegas. But the recent reporting, certainly on the boxing side, has been that basically that Turkey's bosses, for a lack of a better description, have not that they've been displeased with the results, but they did that big stadium show with Terrence Crawford in LA, and it was a financial disaster. Like they just completely shit the bed. And I've said this before. People think like because the Saudis are made of money that they don't care at all about the losses. That is not true, because the dictum that apparently came down to Turkey was that subsequent events need to be held in Riyadh. They need to be held in Riyadh. And maybe not all of them. Like, for example, they did the one at Wembley and whatever else, but I think that had already been in motion as well. But in general, with some limited exception, they have to be in Riyadh. Would the UFC want to put that fight in Saudi Arabia? And again, by itself, that wouldn't be a big deal. They put pay-per-views, they put big events there previously. They put pay-per-views in Abu Dhabi, which is, essentially a geographic neighbor, more or less. Couldn't you just do it in Riyadh? The answer is yes, in terms of like the pay-per-view. Like, would Saudi Arabia then pay the difference to have a fight there for the trade-off in pay-per-view, because you wouldn't be in like Chicago or Los Angeles or, Las Vegas. So they would pay both the remainder of Jon's purse or whatever, and then essentially a site fee to offset the loss in pay-per-view, also because you're not in the same time zone, because you now have to have like a 5 p.m. pay-per-view, right? All that kind of stuff. They might be willing to do that. But then the problem is like nobody goes to Riyadh. Now you might say, well, Tom Aspinall versus Jon Jones could fill out Riyadh, but dude, like Beterbiev versus Bivol couldn't do it. And I'm not saying Jon's not bigger than those guys. He is. He's bigger than those guys. But like, is that the best place to put that fight? UFC would probably say not. I would imagine most people would say it's not the best place to put that fight. If it's the only place to put that fight, or it's the best place given the circumstances, it could happen. I think that's one. But I think the other part too is it would be weird to do a media cycle where imagine UFC was like, we're willing to give 15 mil, no more. And then here comes Uncle Turkey. He's like, I'll give you another 15. I'll match UFC. I'll match him. So then you get to 30. Jon's like, okay, all right, I'll do it for 30 million. I mean, I'm positing a scenario here. Then you get to a place where like when they ask, why is it in Riyadh? People are going to ask, and then you're going to have to get to a point where like, Turkey's probably going to want to credit as like a key contributor to make this fight happen. You're going to underscore the fact that the UFC didn't want to pay enough money for it, like as part of how like that fight got made. I mean, I guess you could do that. I think you could. Again, it's not a reason that it wouldn't happen. It just creates a little bit of weirdness ultimately in the end. I don't know. I mean, the other thing that they could do is, of course, they could try some kind of sponsorship event similar to Noche UFC in contravention to the necessity of pulling everything back to Riyadh. But I think so long as the fact that to the extent that making sure that their events take place in Riyadh or somewhere else in Saudi Arabia, but like Riyadh as I understand it, that is a limiting factor. That is a very limiting factor for them. All right, let's see. People have been saying MMA has become a right-wing sport, excuse me. As a black person, I've always felt that since the late 2000s to present day, definitely worse now, but that being said, it's generally why it took me so long to get into it. Boxing has always been the combat sport where predominantly the black community, like myself included, would watch. Yes, that's true. What will it take for more black Americans to watch MMA besides getting rid of right-wing politics in the UFC right now? Well, as we've seen, the political landscape has been skewed to an extent where I don't think that is as much. It's still a predominantly white person sport. That's just the reality. But there has been some political realignment where I think a small degree of these concerns are not as relevant as they once were. I don't know how to explain this to people. People hate having these conversations, especially in MMA, because they just imagine that like, any kind of conversation around race and sports is like an automatically artificial one, and that people are observing things that, may or may not be true, but even if they are true, they're irrelevant or unimportant. And so it's really hard to have any kind of good faith conversation, because if I bring stuff up, there's inevitably going to be some kind of Oakley wearing neckbeard in the comments, very concerned about how this is just being like hijacked into the conversation. The best way I can tell you is, guys, here is how there are racial divisions in the sport, is because not only, like I've said it a million times, I have been to a million boxing events where the majority of the crowd was Black or Latino or some combination of the two, and I've never seen that at a UFC event. I've never seen that at a UFC event in Brazil, and in fact, Brazil has almost similar fault lines where they have like the majority of their it's a little more complicated, but the point I want to make was certainly about attendance. You just see the same commonality throughout the Americas between like how the fans respond to what's important to them. And in the States, MMA has become the prize fighting choice of predominantly white audiences, and boxing has become the predominant choice of Hispanic Americans and African Americans. And then, there's mixes both directions like that. It seems to me that like that's the bigger question is like, why are those so central to those communities in that way? The on the white side, what I can tell you is, I think there was a lot of people who grew up like me, 80s, 90s, who were big boxing fans. That all kind of faded in the late 90s, mid to late 90s and early 2000s. And then they just kind of lost their way. And then MMA got kind of heated up again. And it just recaptured it. It taught a new generation of Americans, predominantly white ones, like how to be fight fans again. I think they had kind of gotten lost in all of that a little bit. And now it just becomes culturally ascendant to the point where it's not some of these same dynamics, but that was its reassertion. And all I can tell you is like here, like for example, in the DC area, if I went to Lamont Peterson, well, Lamont Peterson too, Lamont Roach. When I go to these gyms, they're all in Black neighborhoods. Like there are some boxing gyms in white neighborhoods, but there's all like the MMA gyms. Those can go in a bunch of different directions. Those are all out in Northern Virginia, or at least a good portion of them. Yes, there are some crazy 88 is in different parts of Maryland, whatever. But in the area, like when I go, it's just down to like the grassroots level. There appears to be a self-segregation in both directions, and I don't really have a clear handle on why, except to say, I think at a time when like white Americans checked out of boxing, Black Americans and Latinos did not. It's like part and parcel of their culture in ways where I think it was a lot more, when the entertainment landscape was less fractured, there was a lot more, I think, similarities and preferences across racial groups. And then as that stratified, so did the preferences along racial lines. To get people back, I think I'd be speaking terribly out of turn if I think I had an idea for what it would take for MMA to get, I said this before, man. I said this before, and this is really true out of after last Saturday. There are a bunch of you who are not going to care about this. I know that. There's going to be another Oakley wearing neckbeard who's not going to care about this in the comments. Okay. The way the UFC is currently handling things with Trump, and if you read the New Yorker, they want to be like done with this. They like Dana hates it and doesn't want to do it anymore. I find that very hard to believe, but take it for what it's worth. But up to this point, all the stuff that they've done for him and this like realignment that they've done, where a major sports organization, I mean, they had the Speaker of the House, they had Elon Musk, they had Vivek Ramaswamy, they had basically the future head of DNI and Tulsi Gabbard. They had like members of like the cabinet there, as well as like top legislators in other key branches of government, all together in the same place. It's not just a realignment politically, it's a realignment with like the UFC's relationship to the government. It's even further than that. But the point I'm trying to make is I have been getting emails and DMs week after week after week after week. I'm telling you, it's been going on for a while, years at this point, with people who just can't take the turn that the UFC has made. And a bunch of you are going to be like, oh, go tell them to cry. Tell them to leave the sport. Fine. You can decide whatever attitude you want to take about this. And I'm also not even declaring to you that I know it's a problem. I do not know it's a problem. I've brought this up before. But the UFC is like aggressively homogenizing their fan base. Consider something for just a moment. When Nate Diaz fought Jorge Masvidal at that same venue, Madison Square Garden, what was this, 2019, circa 2019? When Trump came into that building, there were some cheers for sure. There was plenty of boos, and it was a mixed reaction, right? At best, it was a mixed reaction, but it wasn't one thing or the other. And you could say one was maybe more than the other, but it was still mixed. It was mixed. He comes out this time, and it's a roar of approval. Right. That's not America necessarily having a big change, although that might be part of it. But you're in like, deep blue New York City. That is the fan base being completely homogenized. And I don't think that'll have any short-term consequences. In fact, I think the UFC is about to sign a gigantic Netflix deal or some version of it. Plus, God only knows what else. They're going to make generational money with their next TV deal. I don't think it'll have any effect on that negatively whatsoever. And even in the medium term, the next 5 years, maybe even 10 years, hard to even say if it'll have any impact beyond that. It's just really hard to know. But like long term, what would be the uncontrollable or unknowable effects of tying a sports organization to a political identity, nay, direct members of the government, deeply intertwined between them with a particular known identity as fortunes over time begin to change? What is the long-term consequence of that? And I don't know what the answer to that is, but we're going to find out. Seems at best risky to do that long term, not short or medium term, long term. And so you're asking, like, what could they do to bring them back? I think we're not even in a place where we can have that conversation. We are still in the process of fans who don't like all of that kind of stuff in exile. And I know some of you don't see it, and a lot of people don't want to broadcast it. Believe me when I tell you. I have people in local DC media who are like, I want to be a UFC fan. I don't like it. I have people writing me emails. I just can't take it anymore. I had DMs after DMs on Saturday being like, that was a breaking point for me. And I know what you're going to say. For all the ones that leave, here come two with views that are more in keeping. And that might be true. There might be nothing bad that happens to UFC, short, medium, or long term. I don't know. I don't even have a theory of what could happen. But it's highly unusual. And it's the opposite of Jordan's Republicans wear sneakers too in the most aggressive way imaginable. What are the long-term consequences of that when people who used to be a fan and want to be a fan just can't take it anymore and you make them quit? We're going to find out. But until that process is done, there's going to be no like re-invitation of other groups. The purge is still happening. There is a purge going on, and it's quiet and it's somewhat invisible to people who are not like steeped in this. But you got to imagine, I'm not going anywhere that I can tell anyway. And the people who have a similar political persuasion, they confide in me because for some reason they think that, like, I mean, I appreciate their candor. I don't know what to do about it. You know what I mean? Like, they ask me, like, what can I do? And I don't even know what to say. And again, I know. And there's going to be fucking low information voter donks out there who listen to this and say it's a bunch of crying over nothing and they don't care. I cannot control how they will interpret it. All I can tell you is the other people in this space who aren't aware of this aren't telling you about it because they don't know. But I am. It's all anecdotal, and so the scale of it is hard to understand as well. But that reception change from 2019 to 2024 from the fan base, they have purged a huge amount of people who don't like this kind of thing. I don't know what happens when you do that, but we will find out. Hi, Luke. Congrats on being featured on the Netflix Paul-Tyson Countdown show. Did you notice any boost for you or MK due to the extra exposure? No, not really. Dude, I didn't even get a boost from doing Rogan. That don't get me wrong like that. I mean, there was a temporary social media boost or something. I think I added a few extra 1,000 followers or whatever, but like nothing. I got all this fucking hair. That's so gross. I'm so sorry about this. This is so terrible. I wore black. That was smart. Listen, I'm not saying there's no such thing as like Rogan if you did Rogan 20 times, pause. If you did the show 20 times, would that boost your profile? I would imagine that it would, right? I would imagine that would be a big deal. And I'm not saying it's not like it wasn't nothing when I went on, but like, folks, I will tell you, I did the CNN thing. Nobody heard anything about it. I did Rogan's thing. You ask, like, it didn't change my life in any way. It was cool to do. I appreciated the opportunity, but like, it didn't change anything. Featured in the Netflix Paul-Tyson countdown. It didn't change anything. Nothing gets mentioned to me more when people see me in public, however, than just the videos that I do ordinarily. When people mention to me like, hey, this is how I know you, it's never from all that shit over there. It's never once happened. Never once. It's always when people are like, I listened to the live chat, or I listened to Morning Combat, or I had a guy stop me at the gym last week, big guy, huge, and he was like, yo, you're right, bro. Jones is ducking. I swear to God, he was on the Aerodyne bike as I was walking by. This is a true thing that happened. So it's always from that. Like, that is the stuff that people knows me from. Like, don't get me wrong, it's nice to be featured on this kind of stuff. It's nice to go on big shows, I guess, to the extent that I've ever done it. I went on Dan Le Batard's show before. Like, it didn't, like, I don't know. I don't quite know. Maybe it's weird for me. Maybe other people get bigger reactions. I don't know. But I thought going on like Rogan, like, not that my life would change, but that there would be a noticeable lasting bump. There was not. Thoughts on Buckley versus Colby and what happens if Colby loses? Hard to say, dude. The fucking guy is still ranked, despite doing nothing of value or significance at any point recently. I don't quite get it. But I love the fight. Buckley on this channel told me he really wanted that fight. He would love that fight. I think he likes his chances. I think it's going to be I'm going to guess a 5-round fight. So I have to double check that, but I would imagine that's the case. Although I'm not sure. I think it is. I'll have to double check, but I'm going to operate under that assumption. I think Buckley lights him up on the fucking feet. I think if he can find a way to stop the takedown, or to bare minimum, scramble, or to bare minimum, put him on his heels and wrestle him through, I think he can do a lot. I just feel like Buckley has been waiting for an opportunity, and Colby is actually, this is a great fight for us if you're examining like the value that Colby Covington offers, because it's such a great test for Buckley. Right, Colby is now giving himself up to the process of being useful. When he's fighting other old guys or being inactive or whatever, there's no value to us. We don't get anything from that. The fights themselves suck, and he doesn't tell us about anybody who's coming or going. But now we have that. Now we have somebody like Buckley, who we are kind of probably, I don't want to speak for everybody, but it seems like pretty concerned, or at least concerned is not the right word, paying attention now to what he's doing more than ever. And the stuff he's put together against Stephen Thompson was fantastic. And prior to that as well, like, this is a great fight. This is, and Colby probably still has some, a tough skill set to deal with no matter what. Obviously he looked like crap against Leon. I would imagine he's going to look a little bit better here. Plus, he's sort of, I won't call him a Florida native, but he's a Florida fighter. It's going to be in Tampa. I love it. If Colby loses, how old is Colby? Let's see. What is he, 36, 37? Let's see. 36. He'll be 37 in February, soon. Bro, they're going to make him transportation secretary or something. I don't know. They might make him fucking attorney general. God only knows. I would imagine that might be it for him. Let's see. Let me look at his resume here. When was the last time he fought? Was that one against Leon? That's right, 296. That was, God, he fought once. This dude fought twice in 2019, once in 2020, once in 2022, once in 2021, once in 2022, once in 2023. He's going to have one fight on 2024. Do you know who Colby Covington is? He's Gary Russell. This is the Gary Russell plan. You fight one time a year. He used to do it when he was defending his title, but yeah, it's the Gary Russell approach. He's Gary Russell. Let's see, where would he go from here? I mean, it would be the first time he's had back-to-back losses ever. It's hard to say he would retire, but he doesn't have much time left, right? He doesn't have much. He if he can still get a Dustin Poirier fight, which I don't think he could, but you know, if there's a way to win this one and finagle another opportunity, I think he'll try it. Even if he loses and there's a way to finagle something, you know, I think he'll try. He won't be done with this, but his days are almost up for sure. Here we go. How do you score Bones' performance on 309? I know you talked about him during and after the event, but now that you think about it, don't you think Jones was slow? Sure. I don't think Jones looked prime. I did think he looked a little slow physically. I thought he had decent timing, but not physical snap in the way that he used to have it. And, you know, seemed a little bit more tepid in ways at times, you know, a little bit more hesitant. So he's out of his prime. It's very clear he's out of his prime. I just think that if you're talking about a guy like Jon Jones at age 37 at 230-ish pounds, give or take, and you're seeing what he can still do, leaving both of his feet, hitting that Osotogari, great top control, well-rounded ability, hit him from both stances. Like, he was able to pull the trigger. He had access to all of his weapons, or at least a good majority of them. He had them in multi-phases and in different transition points. And, you know, I did think that some of those escapes where he's like literally turning his back and running away, you're going to get eaten alive doing that against Tom Aspinall. He'll fucking destroy you if he tries that. But he might have just been much more comfortable doing that against Stipe, who couldn't really get much use of anything trying to collapse range. So, yeah, I think in general, Jon looked really good. He thrashed an opponent he should have thrashed. He did acrobatic kicks. He did whatever he wanted to, essentially, from both stances. He didn't take any damage. As I mentioned, looked good through different phases and transitions. You know, people being like, sometimes people take my words and they like kind of like put a metastic, they metastasize it a little bit to say something I'm not really saying. Again, given what Jon has achieved, I don't think beating this version of Stipe really means that much. It doesn't mean that much. It just can't, unless you like really begin to place it like, where does this go in terms of what it required of him to beat? Forget about like you beating the name, just like, you know, what kind of challenge was this to him? What is it? What is the value therefore in beating someone like this? You know, what is it at this stage of your career? It's got some value, but like, dude, when your career is built off his fucking wins, like that's not one of his better wins. That's one of his least impressive UFC title wins, not because of the way it went, but because the way it went is a function of who that guy was on that night. So I think Jon's got a lot of ability. And dude, matching up with Tom obviously has got athletic, at this point, he's got athletic gifts that Jon won't have an answer for. Right? His speed, his foot speed, his ability to cover distance, his power. Jon has no answer for that. Now, Jon has other things that I don't think Tom's going to have an answer for, but like Tom's got those advantages, like locked in. But dude, I've said it before, there's still a lot unknown about Tom. What he looks like in the 4th round, nobody knows. 5th round, nobody knows. What if he has to spend the whole round pinned underneath? Like, what happens then? What does his ground and pound defense look like? You don't know. Nobody knows. So these questions, they are not affirmatively resulting in negative answers, but they are important. They're important to the equation here because it helps inform our judgment about what's what. So I am perfectly happy to say Jon is out of his prime, very, very easily out of his prime. But even that, and even against an opponent like Stipe was on Saturday, he's still good. He's still good. I just can't stand people being like, you know, Dana was like, oh, he deserves to be ranked pound for pound number 1. I'm like, no, you don't. Not beating that guy. No. That's to me as impressive as beating at this stage. Like, that's as impressive as beating Marcin Tybura. You know what I mean? Like, I'm supposed to make you number 1 pound for pound in the world because you beat Marcin Tybura? No, not doing that. I mean, I don't vote, but it's a silly ass argument. It's like, oh, did Jon look good against a guy with big name value? Well, yeah, if that's the equation, sure. You know, but as Sam Morrell said, talking about Tyson and Paul, it's like, yeah, at one point in time, it was cool to bang Liza Minnelli. It's not cool anymore. Doesn't mean the same thing. All right, let's see here. With a win over Jon this weekend, wouldn't Figgy be more deserving than Umar for a title shot? Figgy would have 2 wins over former champs Cody and Jon, a recent title contender in Cheeto, and Rob Font, who just got a nice win over Kyler Phillips. Plus, Jon has a win over Corey Sandhagen, who was Umar's only relevant win. Well, I'll say this. I thought what they were going to do with Merab after the Noche thing was just feed him Nurmagomedov before Ramadan. But that's not going to happen, or at least it appears it's not going to happen, right? And so as a consequence, now you're in post-Ramadan territory. But now the division keeps moving, and now you have Jon and Figgy going at it. I actually agree with you. I think if Figgy won against Jon, they would be well within their right to give him a title shot. Now, whether they will or they won't, because the other guy's last name is Nurmagomedov, your guess is as good as mine. I don't know what the answer to that is. But yes, if we're just talking about what the resumes are today, Figgy had done more, but he had no one win that was on par with a win over Corey Sandhagen. If you add a clean win over Jon, I would consider that on par or better. Yes. And then you would have all those other wins on top of it, and that would make it a stronger case for the resume. Yes. If he can get that win, then yes. Mm-hmm. Oops, excuse me. We'd love to know your read on the Conor Nikita civil trial. I have not kept up in the last day. Yes, today. I did not read about today. I thought the judge's closing statements were quite favorable to Nikita, which I honestly wasn't expecting, at least so forthright. I'm going to wait. I'm going to hit up some of the people who've been covering the trial. I'm going to wait on that. But once a verdict is reached, I'm going to reach out to people who covered the trial, and then we're going to get to all of those. It's a perfectly fine question, but I am still trying to absorb. It's hard to understand things from afar. We're not in the courtroom. This is not even my country. Obviously, there's a lot of similarities, but there's just a lot of stuff you miss along the way too. I want to see what somebody who is in those courtrooms every day, covering the trial, covering the evidence, covering what was heard from the defense, from the prosecution, heard from the jury, and the whole bit, like, was there for all of that. And we're going to do that here on the channel. So it's a perfectly good question, but yeah. Here we go. What are the payment arrangements when a fighter gets sent to the hospital after a fight? Does the UFC fund the treatment, or must the fighter fund the treatment / accommodation themselves, or via insurance? Insurance will cover a significant amount of it, nearly all of it. Let me be clear. The insurance, okay, so any injury you sustain on fight night, the promoter has to cover all of it. Like, so that there can obviously be a dispute over, once you get into like deep stages of rehabilitation, whether or not that is a related issue to the pre-existing one, but okay. So if they have to go for anything that it's accident insurance, it was what they essentially have. It's not comprehensive, but it is accident. My understanding is when they go to the hospital, all of that stuff is covered through the insurance itself that they have. It was married into. That doesn't mean that like other promotions that don't have insurance are off the hook on fight night. They also have to pay for everything. I'm not exactly sure how some of that gets handled. Whether the promoter has a policy that I'm not sure. I have to double check on that, actually. I'm not sure what happens when the other ones go, because I know in certain cases the fighters have to fund it themselves and then get reimbursed. That has happened before. I think you guys remember Sabah Homasi was similar to a situation like that with, I think, Bellator PFL. So it can happen, but certainly with the case of UFC, they have accident insurance, and that should be comprehensive, both pre and post, but certainly post. But the state makes them cover it. Like, it's not even an option. Like, they have to do it. They're obligated by law. So in the event that the insurance wouldn't cover it, the promoter would still be on the hook. Hey, Luke, on MK after RDR's fight, you guys basically mentioned his comments telling people not to sign with one early in the show and said you would talk more about it later, but it was never brought up again. Oh, that's my bad. I was just curious what you and BC were going to say in regards to his comments. I've forgotten now, but I'm sure you guys all saw it. He has the back and forth with GM3. He wins. It's a nice win for the most part. And then afterwards, he's like, don't sign. And it just, I forgot what I was going to say, except, man, like, he didn't seem like a crackpot or a malcontent, or, he wasn't making a big claim about I'm not paid enough, or do you know what I mean? Like there was no other accompanying issue other than it was just across the board difficulty, across the board frustration. And we've seen their contracts. Like we beat up on UFC contracts, and for a good reason. They're the 8,000-pound gorilla in the industry. But it is also true simultaneously that one's contracts are as bad, if not worse. PFL's contracts are in many respects as bad, in certain cases might be worse. Like there's not really a better contract at that level of the game. Obviously, if you get like a regional tier event, or something with like Cage Warriors or people that have like a Fight Pass deal, you will get it's much easier to get out of the deal. And so who really cares? No big deal, right? But at that top level, all of those contracts are just as bad too, where again, they, at least insofar as what they are contractually allowed to do, one requires people who if a woman wants to change her name, they have to get their permission. They may not even enforce that deal, but it is still something that is written into their contracts. And then if they want to go to the mat for it, they can. Like that's just absolutely insane. The amount of like claim they try to have over your autonomy and personhood is absurd. So I feel like the word is kind of out on that. Him doing that is sort of emblematic of a broader movement that's in place. You guys remember Awesome Zaidi out of Karate Combat, who's going on a big long crusade against them. Mikey Musumeci left him. Sage left him. They still have some key assets. They got Cade Ruotolo. That's great. I mean, that's a huge asset for them. They got some other ones too, but it felt like there was a bit of a realignment happening with one kind of behind the scenes. You've already explained why Jon can't get FU money for the Aspinall fight, in all likelihood. I mean, they've just never done it. And Dana has made it clear that he doesn't want to see Jon versus Alex for the BMF. Currently, there's only two possible outcomes. The UFC strips Jon or he retires. If you had to guess, what is the timetable for these outcomes? When will the heavyweight division finally be able to move on? I feel like if they don't have an answer first quarter, they don't have to book a fight first quarter, but if they don't have an answer first quarter, or even, they might let it go second quarter. Here's the thing you have to think about. If you're going to do Jon versus Tom, and they're actually going to be able to make it, right? Like somehow Turkey comes in, or UFC says, all right, this time we are going to pay the fuck you money, right? However unlikely that might be, let's just imagine that it does. Where are you going to put that? Man, you're going to want to put that like as an important day. And I know what we're probably all thinking the same thing, which is International Fight Week, right? Jon versus Tom at International Fight Week in Las Vegas, they would do a $20 million gate for that. You know what I mean? They would do a $20 million gate for that. That would be fucking huge if they did it that big and in that way. And so you're asking, like, how long would it take? Dude, if they do it that way, we won't see Jon back until fucking July. I mean, so I feel like they're probably going to try and exhaust their options that way, because, like, Conor might come back later in the year. What the hell does that even mean? What does that even mean? Does that mean he's not even going to be around in the summer? He's going to turn like 37. How old is Conor McGregor turning this year? How old is Conor McGregor turning? Let's see. Let's see. I'll tell you. He is Conor. He's 36. He'll be 37 in July. You know what I mean? We're going to be 37 by the time this dude gets back. 37. It's just, can you rely on that? Dude, I don't know if anybody's going to ask about Conor. I don't know how you can't look at what Conor's doing now and realize it's over. It's over. Like, it's probably been over for quite some time, but it's over. He will. Okay, I don't know if he'll even fight again, but let's assume he fights at least one more time. He's probably going to look like shit. Probably. That's not a guarantee, but dude, you just got to read the tea leaves. This is not a sport where you can do what he's doing and perform well. Like, you can't do that. I mean, even Jon Jones, like, left light heavyweight right as it was nipping at his heels, and then he fights Gon, who fought like shit. Okay, but he fought a fucking corpse in Stipe. Like, he isn't going and trying to fight the young guns either at this point. You know, and even then, he might fight somebody equally old or, you know, pretty old along the way. But like, dude, Conor might fight again. He might even win one again. I don't even, you know, but like any kind of like return to glory, like real glory inside the fight game is fucking over. Cooked, finished. Will not happen. Cannot happen. And I'm not even convinced he'll fight again. Like, even that seems to me very speculative. I would still bank on it happening, but winning, I'm not even sure who he can beat anymore with this kind of time off. Dude, he's going to look fucking terrible, especially as you get into your late 30s. If you're not using those muscles in those kinds of ways all the time, if you're not training in a way to keep your cardiovascular condition in a place where it needs to be, and just the bedrock of your game sharpened and part of the muscle memory, like you have to live that life. And I again, irrespective of what's being charged, I just mean as a guy who made money in the fight game, if he wants to be done, I think it's time. But for some reason, he doesn't want to do that. And so, you know, getting back to this question, if you're the UFC, you want to count on that? I mean, they probably think they can get one more out of him. Like, look how hard it's been to get this last one out of him. They got as close as 303, then he broke his toe, and then that's out. Now he's got this civil rape trial going on. I mean, it's like, you know, and then every time you see him, he's promoting his beer or he drunk as fuck at a BKFC show. And golly, man, he's just Don Jr. out there just rubbing coke on his gums. It's insane. It's insane. So they're going to want a big attraction. That's a good place to put it. And, you know, what kind of leash are they going to give any kind of like hardball negotiation that Jon might enter into? Probably a significant one if it becomes, you know, difficult to actually get across the finish line. Oh, I got sent this by a million people. Did you see Mike Tyson's quote about legacy? Mike says, quote, "Man, I don't know. I don't believe in the word legacy. I just think that's another word for ego. That's just some word everybody grabbed onto. Now it's used every 5 seconds. It means absolutely nothing to me. I'm just passing through. I'm a die, and it's going to be over. Who cares what about legacy after that?" The quote keeps going on, but this to me seems like real championship mindset rather than the weak sauce Jon Jones has been spewing recently. Jon's obsession with himself is textbook narcissism, though I know you'll hesitate to put a label like that on without a psych degree. That's true. I would not know what to say about that. But yeah, I did see Mike say that. Dude, what have I been saying on this? Clarifies the stakes, boys and girls. Clarifies the stakes. I've got a finite amount of time. I need to do something, if I can at all possibly, stay reasonably healthy, try to do something reasonably meaningful to me. Try to have some fun and, you know, meaningful experiences, meaningful social connections. And when it's done, it's done. And that's it. And to the earth you will return. There's this notion of like living on forever, like you're fucking Napoleon or something is like, I saw this God, what's his name? It's like a writer / philosopher. What's his name? Let me see. Is it him? It's Alain. I forget his last name. He's a French, or he has a French name. Alain something. And he was arguing that it was kind of funny. He was arguing that people who have a good sign of parenting are people who are not obsessed with celebrity. Now, I don't know anything about, like, I'm not here to, not trying to pull a Stipe thing where Jon's like, he's talking about my dad. I'm not talking about that. What I'm saying to you is, because Lord knows, like, you know, I've tried to pursue a public career. There's something to be said about me and my own upbringing relative to this conversation. I'm not really getting into that. What I am saying is the reason why people who, why it becomes a marker of like good parenting is because they have enough internal validation that they're not seeking the external validation of others. And the quest for celebrity is like the ultimate question of external validation. I would actually argue no. And I'd actually argue that the quest for legacy is the external one. Now, if you're actually doing something so accomplished that you want to become like the best NBA player of all time, and you have to actually put together the accolades that get you there, I think I can understand that. This is the point I'm trying to make. It's like, he's talking about his legacy, and then he's fighting the corpse of Stipe Miocic. Like, this does nothing. this does nothing. This is not beating the Celtics in a sweep. This is beating the Wizards. You know what I mean? That's who you beat. You beat the Wizards. Congratulations. Not a great team. Bad three-point shooting. Koulibaly's all right, but, bad team. Bad team. So, they're pros. They're in the league, but not a good team. Oh, here we go. Let me get to this one. Dana told Jim Rome that he anticipates Conor to return in the later part of next year, so another huge delay, a whole year. Luke, do you think it's because Conor's ongoing legal troubles, upcoming TV leverage deal, or the UFC just sees how unstable and messed up Conor is, and they don't want to risk building? I mean, it's all of these things. At this point, after the last withdrawal, although still a name, he's basically lost any significance for them to care enough. There's still enough to care. That's not quite true. But yes, it has diminished a lot. Also, would you agree that Chandler is now closer to fighting Conor if Conor ever fights than ever before? He proved that after 2 years of inactivity, he still has plenty of fun gas in the tank. Cuts promos easily. I don't know about that. He is beloved. I don't know about that. And relevant, definitely. That's definitely true. While being very beatable. Yeah, probably. Plus, they've got history. At first, I thought it was a strange call-out, and then now I'm kind of like, well, not that strange, although hard to say exactly what Conor's going to do. Dude, let's see what happens with this trial. Let's see what, dude, can you even say where this fucking guy is going to be week to week? Much less, is he going to be ready by, International Fight Week or pick a day, September, October, a year from now, pre-Thanksgiving 2025. That's what we're talking about later in the year. That's what that means. Dude, who knows? He is living every life other than the one that leads to winning. Doesn't make winning impossible, but it does make it hard, or even returning difficult. Yeah. Oh, God. Someone's like, what do you think about Jake Paul versus Stipe? I think I'd rather die. Let's do this one. I acknowledge these are big ifs, but if Jon were to finish Tom Aspinall and then finish Poatan before retiring, how would you feel about Jon standing in the MMA GOAT debate? Combined with his current body of work, the idea of Jon ending his career on such a high note while past his prime would be unrivaled by any other MMA fighter in history. Yeah, I'll just say this very clearly. If he beats Aspinall, I think the argument is closed for the foreseeable future. It's still somewhat debatable because he hasn't really beaten anybody of high achievement. Again, Stipe is of high achievement, but it's not a high achievement to beat him at this point, right? What is the level of achievement that is required to beat somebody at this stage? Not that high, relatively speaking, but it is for Tom Aspinall. And if you were to do that up a division at age 37, bordering on 38, I don't know who would have a resume that would compare. Even the great Anderson Silva, and for all he did, wouldn't have it. And again, you might be able to make that argument now, right? You could even make the argument now that Jon, not the heavyweight, added a lot, but the overall body of work is so good from 205 that he might even be in that conversation now. I'm telling you, if he beats Tom Aspinall, it's closed. I don't even know what you would even say for anybody other than looks like you guys can fight it out for number two. GSP's win up at Michael Bisping would not be as good. Silva would have wins at 205, obviously, and Griffin and whatnot, and Bonner as well. But we're not the kind of champion. And he'd had dominance in his weight class, but I would still say at that time 205 was for the most part, still better than 185 through long. I mean, when Anderson Silva was fighting Patrick Cote, Jon had much tougher opponents, relatively speaking. For Demetrius, he wouldn't have the second weight class that we could even speak to. Jose Aldo wouldn't have the second weight class we could even speak to. The argument would be over. It would be over. You beat Tom Aspinall, and it's like the slam dunkest of cases, Yeah. All right. With that in mind, let me do something real quickly, if I may. Boys and girls, you know the deal. You know the drizzle. Yes, you do. Look at this. Tooletries. Black Friday sale. 40% off site-wide. Let me show you this. Let me show you this. Now, you can see this. Here, let me take this coupon off, or the thing off. Everything they've got. Shop now. Look at this. Guys, Tooletries.com. You've seen me open the Scrub King here on the show. Here's the shearer, $79 down to $55, 30% off. You can add another $15 with LT15. You can add 45% off this bad boy right here. 45% off. If you've got a dad, you got a brother, you got an uncle, you got a cousin, you got something for yourself you want to get. The scrubbers, the scalp, the beard, all of this stuff works. You can use great technology to get a great grooming habits, great grooming results, using great effective grooming gear. And it's simple, it's clean, it's effective. It's what I use literally every single day. It's easy to store, it's easy to travel with. You can get the whole pack here. Look at this whole pack, 40% off, down from $205 to $123. And again, LT15, 15% on top of it, boys and girls. Tooletries.com. There's a link in the description box below. This is the one right here that I use all the time. Well, I mean, you know, it's gotta be careful what you're cutting it with, but I have several of these, so there's actually a few different uses, but you get the idea right here, boys and girls. Black Friday sale, up to 40% off site wide at Tooletries.com, and then add in LT15 right there for 15% off additionally on top. This is not going to last forever. I think they're going to run this sale through the end of the week, and then it's done with. So this is the time right here. Also, guys, it helps the site tremendously if you guys buy their products, because they're like, oh, this sponsorship of LT, it works. So we'll keep it up. And I would like to keep the sponsorship going, in part because I love their products and they work. And in part, it's obviously good for the business. It's good for everybody, I hope. So there we go. The shearer. Shear them up, boys and girls. Well, boys, really. There you have it. And then last but not least, right here, Tooletries.com, 40% off plus the LT15. Go do it now. All right. With that in mind, let's do this. Let's watch this, and then we'll get to the paid questions. Okay, with that in mind, let's see what you got. Let's go to the top here. Julian Bay says, early thoughts on Banavidez Morrell. Oh, we're going to talk about this on MK tomorrow. And how their styles match up, plus thoughts on Dan Canobio hearing rumors that Bivol Beterbiev 2 could happen in February in the Riyadh card. That would be amazing if they can get back to that one right away. Yes, that would be super fucking awesome. Remember, guys, Beterbiev Bivol, for all the marbles, right? The to be completely undisputed, you know, it was a title unification for all the belts. No rematch clause. No rematch clause. How did that happen? So if they can get that one back, even better. Tremendous. That's the first thing I'd say. Second one, how do their styles match up? Dude, Banavidez is going to walk this fucking guy down for as long as he possibly can to break him, because that's what he does to everybody else. There is no denying that's what he does. If you guys have never seen David Morrell, he is what I would call like an athletic puncher / slickster. He's got slick Cuban boxing plus fundamental Cuban boxing. He can style. He's got, but the thing is this, he's never in a million years has he faced a guy like David Banavidez, like not even close. And in fact, going up in weight class in his last fight didn't look super awesome necessarily. Although Benavidez had a little bit of issue as well against Vosdick. But it is dynamic, athletic, tip of your toes, dancing kind of puncher versus the Mexican monster. Oh my God, I cannot. Guys, obviously Fury versus Usyk 2 it's booked. It's going to happen in December. So like, you know, I'm excited. Of any fight that's booked for 2025 right now, and you know we're still in 2024, I understand, but I'm saying any fights that have been like made for 2025, there's nothing I want to see more than Benavidez versus Morrell. Like, you know, a fraction of the people who watched Paul-Tyson are going to watch Benavidez Morrell, a tiny fraction, and fuck everybody else because you're going to miss a much better fight, much better one. Fight Walla, welcome to the party. Ryan says, hey, look, I have to ask you, what does Aljo Evloev being kicked to the prelims in favor of Landwehr versus Korean Superboy tell you about the state of the UFC? I think you answered your own question. It's like, do I think Aljo versus Movsar is going to be super fun? It could be actually, but like, wouldn't say that's necessarily like the highest probability of something happening, but okay, it's fine. Let's say it's not even high probability. It's like it's arguably number one contender at 145. You just got like a top guy at 145, who has emerged as like a future star for you guys, and putting out on the prelims, like, okay, sorry about this, y'all. I shouldn't have done that. I fucked that one up big time. Sean says, hey, Luke, what do you think could or should be the U.S. response, if any, to Russia reportedly using the first ever ICBM against Ukraine international combat? Scary times. Yeah, I don't even want to talk about this. This is so fucking bad. This is so bad. Like, obviously, what did Biden do? He allowed the use of anti-personnel mines as well as essentially missiles that can strike deep into Russia. That, by the way, the Ukrainians can't even just fire them. They have to have U.S. liaison with targeting and or application of the rockets themselves. Like, they can't just like, it's not like giving them a tank, which they can kind of run on their own, but even then they would need some oversight. But they have to have like tons of joint operation capability to fire those missiles that were not supposed to be fired. It's scary fucking times. But they might just be biding their time waiting for a regime change here. I don't follow enough of Russian Ukraine conflict day to day. I read the Institute for War once in a while, but I don't cover it day to day like when it first happened, obviously, like most people. I say the bigger news was the ICC going after Gallant and Netanyahu. Boy, that was music to my ears. If anyone wants to talk about that, we can. Many Faces, you have probably been asked this before. I'm trying to read more. What are some book recommendations that you have? Doesn't matter the genre, just some of your faves. Again, I'll give you some basic ones. The Master Switch by Tim Wu, Demon Haunted World by Carl Sagan. What's another good one I can give you? It's like readable. I don't want to give something too, what's another one that was like really eye-opening? That's been a while since I've read. Nozick is too difficult. Oh, well, no, that's not easy to read. That's not easy to read either. I'm trying to think, like, what are any of these that, like, some of these have really become outdated and some of them are a little too difficult. Oh, I've talked about on this podcast before, The Maladies of Empire. Was an unbelievable book. And how basically advances that we have in society, or certainly even practices that we have, but iterative ones, and then advances in particular, including medical advances, were all like, we have found in many cases great uses for them, but many of them came from again, quite literally, as the book calls them, maladies of empire. So, like, for example, like one of the early ones in the book is how they discovered stitches. I won't tell you, but you should read the book, and where stitches come from. So, yeah, those three. Give those a whirl. Johnny says, going to McLean, Virginia for a 2-day onboarding. Any good spots in DC for a short trip? McLean's really nice, but it's not that close to the city. I mean, any good spots in DC for a short trip? The sites downtown, the National Mall. Like, if you just got a limited amount of time, the National Mall, just go see there's more than enough in that whole area. As I've mentioned, you can go see money get printed at the Department of Treasury. Did you guys know that? Yeah, it's right by the Holocaust Museum. Actually, it's across the street from the Holocaust Museum. You can go see all the ones and the 20s and the 100s get printed right in front of you. You can actually go and tour and see the whole thing. You can go to the Holocaust Museum if you want to go to. Again, down by the tidal basin, and there's Jefferson Memorial, and then there's Lincoln, and then there's Arlington Cemetery on the other side of the Lincoln Memorial. You can just go see all of this shit. Like, and then there's the Iwo Jima Memorial that's a little further down past that, which is actually even closer to you. So, like, just do that. Just do that. It's just, there's so much shit on that whole promenade, basically. Greg says, hola, Luke. The change in your face from round 1 of going, wow, that's Mike Tyson, to round 3 of you realizing, oh my God, he's beating up a 60-year-old man was hilarious to watch live. Jesus Christ, dude. That fight was so bad. I had several, this is true. I haven't even talked to you guys since then. I had several MMA managers hit me up, 3 of them, in fact. I don't really talk to them that much. They hit me up on Monday being like, you had really strong takes about that fight. I'm like, I don't think I do, actually. I think a lot of people seem to be saying exactly what I'm saying. It's not like I'm out there being like, you guys are here. I'm going to take another step beyond that and say even more outrageous shit. No. Mm-mm. I mean, yeah, there's a bunch of people being like, Mike took it easy on him. These are people that were exposed to lead in their drinking water. Yeah, I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about, a good portion of people being like, this fight fucking blows. Why can't I say that? Pimp Daddy says, hey, LT, if Jon Jones doesn't fight Aspinall in 2025, how long? Yeah. Do you think UFC? Again, I think if we're at a place where they feel like they just can't get one done this year, they'll know that. I'm going to guess second quarter is probably the latest they're going to let that slide because they're going to want to get Tom back out there. But it could be a lengthy battle. Michael says, I'm not super knowledgeable of global politics and would value your opinion. Seriously, dude, just how close to World War III are we? I don't think we're quite as close. There is a certain amount of alarmist. Okay. Some alarmism is extremely warranted. This is, in fact, very dangerous and a ridiculous game that the Biden administration is playing here. At the same time, there is a new incoming commander-in-chief that I think Putin probably feels that he'll have a better relationship with. And you can decide whether that's better or worse. I think certainly for security, it's better to get out of the position that we are in. So I think part of the reason why they've escalated is because they're just like the lamest of ducks at this point, right? That whatever they can do can have limited value, and it doesn't make sense to have a strong retaliation. In fact, because if you're Russia and you retaliate really quite badly against anything American, first of all, they could get pulled into a much worse conflict, a serious one where nuclear volley is potentially on the table. They don't want that, and neither do we. And there's a new president coming in, and I think they probably are just biding their time. Duronimer says, what did you make of Chael's take on Bo Nickal's fight strategy? It seems everyone wants Bo to adopt Habib's do what you do until it doesn't work strategy, but I feel taking away Craig's best weapon was the best move. Well, I don't know. I mean, best move, worst move, right move, wrong move. It's all a function of what he wanted to do. Did he want? I said it. I got people killing me on Twitter for it. I'm like, I don't understand what's so controversial about this. He got 3 rounds of experience, which is probably good for him, right? Getting full 15 minutes. And then on top of it, the second more important component is he got 15 minutes basically of striking time. And that's invaluable for that guy. Like it was obviously a concerted effort. Do I think he could have beaten him quicker going into his guard? Yes. Oh, but Paul Craig has a good guard. Paul Craig has a good guard. That's true. But Bo Nickel should be able to pass it. He should be able to work to the back. Should be able to unleash hellacious ground and pound on him. And I think easily could have finished him with inside the distance. But going on the feet was a little bit harder, although he doesn't have great head movement there, Paul Craig, there either. But to me, it was an attempt to like really work on some of his deficiencies in this game. Not that that was the best way to get the win, but if what you're trying to do is, yes, I want to play it safe to an extent, but I want to get something valuable out of this. I mean, if it was just pure risk aversion, then I think they miscalculated. But either way, he ends up with a really valuable experience. How much it will pay for it, we shall see if they can get him back out there relatively quickly, which I think that they should. But, it's all a question of like what he wanted out of this, what was important to him. But I don't think it was the fastest way to get the win, not by any stretch. And I don't think it was like, yes, were you encountering more danger by going through his guard? Yes. But I think Bo Nickel can do that. I really believe he can do that. No problem. Tobias says, on Friday, you said you had a hard-on from here to Hanover, and Brian using the phrase in its totality. How long until you merge into one being? I think we've already done that a couple of times, but you're right. That is super lame on the part of both of us. But, dude, you hang around someone long enough, you kind of become them. Right and Wrong says, could Jon Jones' fear of fighting Aspinall but desire for legacy lead him to push Dana into cross-promotion to make a fight with Francis? Absolutely fucking not. I mean, okay, there's a remote chance that they'll pay fuck you money, right? Remote. Not at all likely. Can kind of squint and see it, but not likely. There's no chance that they co-promote. Turkey couldn't even do that. The ability to make sure that no other MMA promotion can ever compete with them is core to what they do now. It's core to what they do. This is like just, you might as well ask them to not put on MMA. XV Sting says, Luke watching this live chat on a plane mid-air in Australia. MK. Oh, you are watching this. Oh, awesome, buddy. Are you fucking up their communications trying to stream this thing? Jake from Windy City says, how many streaming services do you have in total? So let me think about that. So some of this is split with my wife. So I'll just say in the house. Because we do have some shared accounts and some not. So Netflix, Prime, Max, Disney, YouTube TV, ESPN Plus, Hulu. I got the bundle. Paramount Plus. You know what? I used to have Paramount. Do I have Paramount Plus anymore? I don't know. I'll have to check. I used to have Paramount. I don't know if I have that anymore. What else do I have? I think that's it. Yeah, there you go. James says, Luke, with all these videos going around trying to prove that the Paul-Tyson fight was rigged, is there any validity to the claim? No, there's almost certainly none, and it's fucking stupid. And you should tell anybody who sends that to you, you have my permission to make fun of them to their face about it, right? And they may not even be stupid, but they are stupid about this. Guys, what is the number one sign when someone is shot? What's the number one sign? You might say in boxing, obviously we're not talking about something else, but in boxing, what's the number one sign? You might say their legs aren't there. Okay, that's part of it, but that can be one. But what's really think here for a second. Like what is that thing that you would be like, okay, this fucking guy is washed? And the answer is their inability to throw back, their unwillingness to throw back, or their trepidation in certain sequences to throw back. When you're showing me a guy at 58 years old who was shot 2 decades ago, and you're like, oh, he pulled his punches. Yeah, I bet he did. And could it be that Jake also, had some mercy on him along the way? I mean, I think that to me is a little less conclusive, but let's just go with it. Fine. There's your explanation. You had a guy who's not very good, who felt bad about the whole thing, fighting a guy who was shot before some of you watching were even born, and came out to the ring with a copper tone knee brace on. I don't even understand what the fuck we're talking about here. Oh, they had to coordinate this shit. You think they're going to coordinate some shit with more than 100 million accounts streaming that motherfucker live? Hey guys, let's commit a crime, because that's what it would be. It would be illegal. It'd be a fucking crime. Let's commit a crime under the biggest microscope imaginable. Let's do that. Let's not do the crime that we could do other places. Let's do the crime when everyone is looking. Let's do that crime. Why would you turn in a crime when you can just have a bad fight that's legal? It doesn't even make any sense. Just have a bad fight. Just don't try if you're Jake, and if you're Mike, you're halfway trying, or I'm not taking it easy. I mean, he's 58. What can you really do? You know what I mean? That's completely legal. Why the fuck would you make that illegal when everyone is watching? When you can just fucking jack off in everyone's face and it's completely legal. So you have my permission to explain this to the dullards in your life that have been confused by this, because I know my audience is way too smart for this. You have my permission to explain this to them, that the incentive structure, the mechanics, the motive, the legality, the reality, none of it adds up. It only adds up if you're Gomer Pyle. Then it all makes sense. You know what I mean? If you're Gomer fucking Pyle, then it's oh wow, this theory is a very compelling theory. But you, my friend, and the folks watching, none of you are Gomer Pyle. I asked on the free portion, but in case you missed it, after Pereira versus Jiri 2, you seem excited to see Pereira at heavyweight. What changed? 205 sucks. 205 sucks. 205 is terrible. There's some good fighters in there. But as a general kind of like who's really available for him or what, people listen, how about this as a bare minimum? Part of the reason why you were excited to see Topuria versus Max, whatever way you wanted that one to go, was because Topuria had done things to put himself in that position to get people excited or, to earn it. And Max, holy shit, had done the exact same thing. They had earned it. Like, who at 205? Okay, you got Ankalaev. All right. I mean, he has to see that one out. The Ankalaev one is the big one. What if Poatan knocks him out? Like, now where are we? Like, there's nothing. It's just that 205 is terrible. Terrible. Jewel says, is it me or does the Aspinall match go the way of the Reyes fight for Jones, if not much worse? Well, the Reyes fight went the distance and John rallied and won. So I'm not sure what you mean by that. I don't know that Tom has that kind of ability to go that late in that way. And I think he has more success early than Reyes had. To me, it's a question of if John can withstand the early onslaught, you would think that maybe there's a way he can, like John's got the clutch gene. Gustafsson fight, Reyes fight. He rescued himself both times. And I thought he lost the Reyes fight. Some people thought he lost the Gustafsson fight, but to the judges there, he did not. He rescued himself. I don't think this is one of the situations where I think, Tom would exact a much heavier toll that, either Tom stops him or, I'm not sure. That's a different equation for me. Morning Wombat. Any thoughts on Sonny Edwards? He didn't have the power to keep Bam off of him in terms of his skills, but he's world class. Are you going to watch the 5-5 2020 Olympic gold medals? No thoughts. I have not seen enough tape one way or the other to have informed comment about this, but I appreciate the question. Shine says, even against an older Stipe, John looked good enough to be at least a pick him against Tom. Yes, fine. But in my opinion, it's still a big risk. Sure. Wouldn't be mad if he vacated. There'd be no asterisk on his legacy to me. Oh, there'd be a big one for me. Yeah, I mean, everyone's going to be different, but there'd be a big one for me. It'd be like I would add some value to what he did at 205. I would add some. It does do something for him. It doesn't do much. But the thing is, like, if John calls it a day, again, he still might be the greatest of all time. But to me, it's still open for debate. You beat Tom Aspinall and it's closed. It's fucking closed. Carnage says, Luke, whose sexual escapades are grander? Chewy bout it Baca, Paul, let's go Scotland to Craig, or Johnny gyrating Walker. It's got to be Johnny Walker, dude. No one gyrates and cavorts the way he does unless they've just been fucking their way, one village at a time. Alex says, can you rank the top boxing promotions in terms of their roster depth and quality? So we'd have Top Rank, Matchroom, PBC, Queensberry, Golden Boy. I'd probably put roster depth and quality. It's a little harder to say. You might have Top Rank and Matchroom 1 or 2. I'd have maybe Queensberry. I'd probably have PBC. I mean, PBC's got some big standouts, right? It's got Banavidez. It's got Canelo, at least for now. It's got Tank. But they've lost a lot. They're in trouble, I feel like. I'm hearing whispers, man. PBC is in trouble. I feel like the ones who have some longevity in them are Top Rank, Matchroom, and then the other ones, I don't know about PBC, but Queensberry and Golden Boy, they at least have like deals with Saudi Arabia. PBC has tried to like not do the Saudi thing, and I think they might change that because they're in deep shit. Yeah, I don't hear good things about the future of PBC, y'all. They're in trouble. Fifi says, what's your thought on Trump's attempt to get his cabinet picks confirmed as a recess appointment? I don't think it will work, i.e. trying to sideline the soon GOP Senate overview and check. Seems kind of authoritarian. It's exactly what it would be. I don't think it's going to work, but I mean, dude, like Okay. There are a group of people out there that view any criticism of Trump, and what they'll do is they'll accuse you of having Trump derangement syndrome. But these are also the same people that will do no condemnation of him no matter what. And so they see any criticism of him as inherently deranged when it's actually the opposite. That if you can't, like, there's no politician of any persuasion in this country I can't find something to criticize about. It's very, very easy for me to do. And this is a very difficult task to like a certain kind of ardent Trump supporter. They cannot accept that there's anything to say. It's like this fucking bizarre, weird game that they play. So for the folks of you who are not deranged that way, this is for you. Do we not remember how much like daily chaos followed this guy in terms of like administration staff, how much churn he went through? Look at these cabinet picks he's already offered. He offered in the case of Gates, Hegseth, and McMahon. In all three cases, it was known to the Trump team, and certainly in the case of McMahon, to the public. And again, Gates, there was obviously some implication due to previous reporting. They all had scandals, and they nominated him anyway. And now, like at least two of the three, well, one is now gone. Gates had to withdraw, and I don't know if that would have worked in the Senate anyway. And now you still have Hegseth and you still have McMahon, but some of that is very speculative in the case of Hegseth because his situation is like incredibly dark from where we are. This is the Trump experience. This is it. It is constant chaos, constant churn, constant. What was the way you asked this? You're asking something different. It is constant attempt to break precedent and norm, which in certain cases is no big deal and in fact might be welcome. But making sure that other segments, other bodies of the government have the ability to use their powers as the framers intended, or at a bare minimum, absent that consideration, just in a more balanced way that government functions transparently and appropriately. There's always these attempts to work around them. Like they haven't turned in any of their the ethics agreements that are required for the handoff to happen. So like the handoff is going to happen, but the transition teams haven't been able to even talk to each other because he doesn't want to do this paperwork. This is what it is. Did you guys see what the CEO of Delta said today? He said that Trump told them that he's going to repeal that if there is a cancellation, you're entitled to an automatic refund, and they don't have to show you there was a rule that also dictated that they had to show you the upfront price of the ticket of any kind of airline purchase that you may have. They want to repeal. He's going to repeal both of those. Like, what? That's his constituency, and you don't hear me defending Biden on here. In fact, if the International Criminal Court got one thing wrong today, it was wrong to single out Netanyahu and Gallant. President Biden should have been indicted as well. I'm saying this very explicitly. He should have been indicted as well today for the crimes that essentially helping to, I mean, if you're providing material cover for starvation as warfare, and then you're running some kind of operation to cover for it in the media and to the public more generally, you are complicit in these crimes. You are absolutely complicit in these crimes. You don't hear me saying anything nice about them. But equally, it blows my fucking mind. I told you guys this before the election. When people are like, well, he didn't get away with all this stuff in the first time. Why would it happen the second time? I'm like, guys, it's because everyone in his orbit realized that he was batshit crazy and did everything they could to mitigate the damage. But all of those guardrails are gone now. So this is going to be the death of Palestine, right? Because look at the promises he made to various donors along the way about what that would be. I mean, you can just go industry by industry. It's the service of oligarchic power the whole way through. You know, and anti-war. I mean, that's another shoe that's going to. I mean, listen, I'll wrap up on this. We have decided that we would like to learn the Trump lessons the hard way, and so we're gonna. No, these arguments will not be convincing at all right now for a huge segment of the audience watching, I'm sure. Give it time. Give it time. He's going to have to run shit into the ground before we could even like hazard a conversation. So let's circle back at that point. But he's already showing you exactly what we saw. Dude, Trump does what he says he's going to do. I'll give him that. There's two things about Trump you actually have to like recognize as I want to say I value in him, but I recognize are real. He does what he says for the most part, like relative to other politicians. He absolutely does what he says, which is bad for me because I don't like what he does. But nevertheless, he at least adheres to it. And number two, he has very good political instincts. He has a keen sense of what people actually want and what actually kind of matters, and has been able to exploit that very effectively. He's very good at that. But like this chaos that you see now, this is exactly what he used to do. So what do I think about it? Like, I lived through it already. I mean, okay, but we want to learn the hard way. We're gonna. I had to learn the hard way with this shit. Stupid ass thing I wore today. Is DC's UFC heavyweight legacy going to be overlooked at better than Jon's heavyweight legacy? Maybe. He beat Prime Stipe, Lewis, who KO'd Volkov. Excuse me, what am I saying? Volk. Then lost 2 competitive Stipe fights. Losing the 2 fights is going to be tough because people are like, oh, well, Jon whooped him. You know what I mean? But of course, we're not talking about the same guy. But I do think that in general, it would be better. Plus, don't forget, he beat Josh Barnett in Strikeforce. You asked about the UFC, but I mean overall at heavyweight. Ray says, Luke Aspinall said Jon has no tape time on him to analyze his style, hence why Jon is refusing to fight him. What guarantees are there Aspinall is not another Cyril Gane? There are none. There are none. There are no guarantees. I don't think that's right, but I don't have a guarantee for you. If what we're looking for is guarantees, they don't exist. UKNW says, I'm an African-American male who has been a fan of MMA since I was a child. Whilst I love the sport and will always love it and never feels like a comfortable, I don't let that keep me out, but it is something of note. Again, people can believe me or not, but I get emails and DMs like that plus worse every single day. Almost. That's a little bit of exaggeration. All the time. All the time. Sometimes several a day. Ben says, predict Illia and Shakur Stevenson, spelled wrong, next 2 fights. Technically, what can Illia do to take less damage while closing the distance? He didn't take much. Which MMA strike should fighters throw more to discourage takedowns? They all come, dude. It's okay. A lot of this is just opponent dependent. For Illia, though, it's going to be probably, I'm going to guess Volk one more time, maybe. I'll say Diego Lopez. I don't know how that's going to work. I feel like if Aljo beats Movsar, they're not going to give it to him, but we'll see. So I'll say something like that. He might moonlight at 55. What was the other one? Oh, Shakur. I mean, are they going to run the Cordina fight back? So I'll say Cordina. And then after that, I don't know. I don't know what they're going to do. That's a much tougher one to answer. Strikes to discourage takedowns. Oh, what can Ilya do to take less damage while closing the distance? I don't think he takes a lot of damage to close the distance. I think he takes an appropriate amount given the boxing range he competes in. He could change his style a little bit, and that would mean, you could do some things to meaningfully limit the amount of damage, but just the way that if you have a boxing-based style, you're going to get touched more. The quality of those, the quantity of those can vary to some degree, but you're going to get touched more. It's just the reality. So he could change the ranges a little bit, but that would change his game. I think he just kind of has to. He's been better. Yes, early in his career, he got tagged with big shots, but more recently, he just hasn't been. Now, the most common thing he gets hit with is like a jab or maybe a one, like the 2, but he doesn't really get hit with super hard shots as much, hardly at all anymore. It's more the accumulated damage, Afifi says, Dana is frustrated with the pound-for-pound rankings because he treats it like the, quote, currently active fighters' GOAT contentions when they are 2 different lists. No, he kind of diverged that. He actually said he's the best pound-for-pound and best. I think I'm not sure how he said it, but he kind of made a distinction when he was talking about him at the post-fight press conference as both pound-for-pound number 1 and the best ever. He did bifurcate it, but the problem is his arguments for best ever, I can entertain. I mean, it's debatable, but I can entertain it. But the argument for pound number 1 by beating the ghost of Stipe Miocic, yeah, no. Justin says, just turned 30 a couple of weeks ago, and I honestly didn't dread that turning of the decade. Was there any age you've reached where that made you feel old? 40 was old. Was 40 significantly different than turning 30? Yes. Yes, it was. 30 was not a big deal to me. 40 was a big one. And I felt a little bit older at 32 because, your teens and your 20s feel somewhat connected. 30 feels like a different thing. 40 is a much different thing. Yeah, I felt very different. Lewin says, Carlos Condit career thoughts, peaks and valleys. Technically, the peak would be beating Nick Diaz, although the fight itself sucked. I would say that, dropping George St. Pierre, the Campman fights, I think they fought twice. The Thiago, oh God, his last name. Jesus, the guy who fought St. Pierre. My brain's not working anymore. They had a sick fight in Brazil. That fight is an underrated gem, if ever there was one. The Hiromitsu Miura fight. By the way, did you guys hear this? Hiromitsu Miura died relatively recently. I think he died of leukemia. Let me look this up for a second. Well, I'll come back to it. But I think he had leukemia. So that was an issue, obviously, that I didn't know about. I'm trying to think of some other. Let me pull up his resume because I'm just kind of going off memory. He had a lot at the end there that was not that great, and I don't want to do him dirty. So let's go back to the heart of his resume. Oh yeah, so he had some great wins, dude. And in WEC, you won't respect some of this, but this is good. The John Alessio win is good. Brock Larson, Carlo Prater, that was a sick one he got. Hiromitsu Miura, which was the end there of WEC. He lost the first Campman fight, then beat Ellenberger, Rory McDonald. That was a fun one. Dan Hardy, Jong Hung Kim, Nick Diaz. Then he lost to St. Pierre and Hendricks. That Hendricks fight was pretty good. Then he beats Campman in the rematch. That was great. Lost to Woodley with an injury. Came back. Thiago Alves. Yes, what am I thinking? That Alves win, he kind of was never the same after that one. All of those are fucking win. Now, at the end there, when he's fighting the Oliveras and Chiesas, it was just, he was shot already. The fight against Lawler was where everything came undone. It was the Alves fight, which was a tough one, and he followed it up with the Lawler one. He was never the same. He was never the same after that, but he was. And folks remember or forget that there was a crucial detail here. Let me see if it's on his Wikipedia page if I can. I don't see it here. Remember, he was at a group called Fit NHB before he was ever at Jackson's, and they had a big rivalry, and so it was a big thing for him to switch too. So but he always stayed native to Albuquerque. Just an incredible guy, really incredible guy. J Flo says, "Love Tooletries. What do you trim your beard?" I use a lot of just eyesight. I don't actually run a trimmer through it. I kind of just eyesight it. But thank you for supporting the sponsor. GJ Brass, has the stage been set for the political alignment of all the big U.S. sports now? NFL, MLB, NBA, NHL. The UFC seems to have thrown down the gauntlet. I have seen people say the NBA did something similar, and they did do something similar, but even then it wasn't the same. They did not, again, you had members, deep members into the cabinet of Trump there at that event. You had the Speaker of the House essentially at that event. That is such a different level of detail than Elon Musk, who's, a fucking weird goblin looking motherfucker. The whole, but the point is, he's important. He's relevant. He's a very influential figure. I mean, it's more than just party realignment. It's like the entire side of the government, little members of the government of high power are all kind of intertwined. The NBA didn't do anything like that. They did a lot of messaging. They did a lot of stuff that I think people would call peak woke. They did do that, but it wasn't this level. And I think that they have dialed it back. Are we going to see people just all of a sudden, in 2022, when there's it won't be the presidential election, but there'll be another big election, right, for control of the House and Senate. Are they going to just trot out people all the time? I don't buy that. I mean, hard to predict in 2 years, but this is what I mean. It's just very weird and unusual. And I don't know if it carries negative consequences, but it's unusual enough that we'll have to pay attention to see. Ben says, what do you think about an MMA striking promotion? Pride gloves, clinches allowed, no stalling 5 seconds, and no takedowns. I think there are ways that could go well. I mean, that's kind of what one's Muay Thai thing is. It's not quite the same, obviously, but the rules are different, but it's not too dissimilar. But there's also there's also so much product. It's hard to stand out at this point. XV Sting says, LT, can't figure out why the chat is going at you for bringing up politics and fandom being right wing. I'm not American, and I'm sick of how much politics is being mixed into events and conferences. Yeah, you don't really get to complain, guys. I mean, I'm sure that many of you will, and that's okay. I don't really care. It's forced enough on other people who don't want it all the time. And then when it is, and we complain about it, you guys say, cry more. So here's my response. Cry more. Just cry more. I don't care. Like, yeah, these are the rules, right? The initial rules were when players in the late 2000s, early 2010s, when they were advocating for various causes that were not in alignment with the right, what we heard was what? Shut up and dribble, and all these claims about how important neutrality was. And then when the shoe was on the other foot, it turned out neutrality wasn't what mattered at all. In fact, what mattered was just that they get a turn at it. And then we complained that we don't like that. Their response is to cry more. Well, let me just return the favor. I'm going to say to you guys who don't like it the exact same thing that you guys tell me. And if it makes you feel bad or angry or annoyed when I say cry more, then reflect on your own behavior maybe a little bit about how other people might feel when they get this shit forced on them that they don't necessarily want, especially to the degree that they get it. The worlds are intertwined now. I didn't do that. Dana White and Donald Trump did that. UFC, Ari Emanuel, whoever you would like to attribute blame or praise to in this equation. I didn't do those things. They did those things. Cry more. Fucking go cry. Okay? Okay. Sinbin, what's up, dude? Tanvir says, now that Conor has admitted to cocaine usage, how does that impact the Chandler fight? It doesn't. Of all the things I've learned about Conor, the fact that he used cocaine and admitted it, the fact that he used cocaine and admitted it is like absolutely irrelevant and unimportant to me. I mean, it might have some relevancy for that court case. I'm not here to diminish its impact such that it has one there. But I mean, like, as a person, do I care that another person was using recreational drugs, or that I think that usage of recreational drugs will in any way impact getting a subsequent fight? No, not at all. Blade says, do you still keep up with Israel after finding out about his disappointing views? Yes. I mean, I still hear he's still, I mean, even if I like, all his stuff is just constant in, like, I'm not even sure if I even follow him anymore, but his stuff still, I mean, he was, for example, did he not just lift weights with Hassan Piker? I saw all that. You know what I mean? Thoughts on Chandler versus Pimblett or Fiziev? Chandler versus Pimblett. That's a weird one. I think there are better fights to make than that. Chandler versus Fiziev I could tolerate, but I think there are probably better usages of our time. 9:15 a.m. So, hey, Luke, your thoughts on all these boxers? Dubois, Ward, Froch, Garcia, just begging Jake Paul for a payday, willing to stall their divisions for those active. I understand it. It's prize fighting. I don't have any problem with Jake Paul making money. Go make money. I don't give a shit. Like, make a bunch of money. If you can generate this kind of an audience, make money. But we as customers have a right to be like, yo, that shit sucked. That fight was ass. And we also have a right to be like, you knew that fight was going to be ass. So, like, what's the problem? Right? What's the problem? But these fighters, these boxers, like, where is Jake going to go from here? I'm sure he'll figure out something. There's probably some lane he can go through, but, like, he's elevated to a point where Andre Ward was calling him out. Did you mention? Yeah, you mentioned Ward. Yeah, Ward was calling him out. Like, a bunch of people want that payday now. I've said it before too. What was the last time you saw a Jake Paul opponent complain about his pay? Doesn't exist. But two things can be true simultaneously. I have no problem with Jake Paul getting rich if he can generate audiences like this. Conversely, you turn in fights like that, I'm going to call it for what it is: dog shit. How is, like, it's completely fair game. Kevin, what's up, bro? Thank you. Dave says banging Liza Minnelli is still a huge win. Cougars rock. I don't know about that. Turd says thoughts on UFC forcing. I mean, I've kind of been over this a lot. I obviously don't like it, but I can't speak for the full fan base. It's just something to pay attention to down the road, but I appreciate that. Jason, what's up, dude? How are you preparing the garbage bird for Thanksgiving? I'm not this year. Deep frying it. Hope you all are having a good turkey day, and hope Barbas is doing okay. Barbas is doing okay. I wouldn't say great, but he's doing okay. I'm not cooking the turkey this year. It's my sister's turn. So my brother and my sister are like phenomenal cooks. They had the restaurant together, right? I'm gonna let them worry about that. Jake says the UFC fans didn't change their tune on Trump. The whole country did. He just won the popular vote. Guys, I have news for you. You have to be fucking delusional to think that. Do you know how many fans I know who have, like, in the last 5 years, because it's obviously not just on Saturday, have ramped up and been like, oh, guys, I don't know if you know this. I'm not making this up. If you look at the vote totals that came out yesterday, because they're still trickling in. Trump's electoral, the share of the popular vote that he has is smaller than the one Clinton had in 2016. The initial news that came out was that there was like this gigantic mandate because it was overwhelming. And there were significant real realignments in the electorate. That is a true thing. But that it's this overwhelming Reagan beats Walter Mondale narrative is simply total fantasy. And people are kind of lathering themselves up in this because that's the way the early voting kind of looked. And then as the days and weeks have kind of passed, you're getting more and more trickling in. As it has trickled in, do you know what the difference between them was in overall in percentages? 1.65 as of yesterday. 1.65%. That's it. 1.65. Nothing. And it's smaller than it's smaller than Bush in 2004 against Kerry. It's smaller than either of the Obama wins. It's smaller than either of Clinton's wins in 92 and 96. I'd be very careful about describing this as a significant alteration to the country. It is a realignment among certain racial identities and as well around income and education. There's real realignment of the electorate. That is real. But what you're really hearing there is not in pure blue New York that UFC fans all of a sudden just decided they liked it. You have substituted out the ones that hate it, and you have brought in ones that loved it, and now it's got the appearance that everyone loves it. No. Do not confuse yourself. That is not what has happened. Give the man the credit for the election. He won fair and square. But it was not some gigantic, overwhelming amount, even if there was an altering in the electorate and how it is composed and where allegiances are now forming. But the raw numbers of it all, it is less than the popular vote total win and margin that Hillary Clinton had over Trump in 2016. By all means, double check that. S. McGee, what is in it for Poetan if Jon vacated the heavyweight belt? I mean, first person to beat Jon Jones is a big... I mean, I know Matt Hamill, but you know what I mean. First person to actually beat him is a big fucking deal. Isn't the main reason we want Pereira at heavyweight so that we can see him get a third belt? Yes, but that wouldn't be the only one. Saul, MK all day. Yes, my friend. Thank you. Appreciate you. Bobby says, I saw some nerd on Facebook say that Prime DC was overrated and Poetan would be a tough fight for him. How badly does DC mop the floor with him? Dude, DC would give that motherfucker frequent flyer miles like he'd never seen before. He would dump him on his head. It wouldn't be close. Tobias says, can a fighter hide an injury, then post-fight say it occurred during the action, saving themselves money to get it fixed? Not only can they, this happens all the time. Less so with the UFC because they have the insurance, but before that, it used to happen all the time. Guys would tear their ACL in practice, go and fight, they get their ass kicked, but they knew they could get the surgery for it, and then they would just get the surgery for it afterward. Common. Chris says, I'm 53. I train 3 to 4 times a week for 45 minutes and feel strong without overload or failure. Is heavier, intense lifting better for health or daily life than my program? No, I think if you're doing that, you don't need anything else. Consistency. That's what you need at 53, right? Consistency. Just the ability to like keep up good habits, have decent enough strength, good body composition, good consistency. You're good, bro. You don't need anything else. Right and Wrong says, could Jon Jones' fear of fighting Aspinall but desire for legacy lead him to push? No, there's no chance. Aqua Buddha, thoughts on Mark Hunt representing himself against Zuffa and Brock and apparently doing a halfway decent job? Yes, he did. Curious on your thoughts about the idea of doping violating the consent of fight contracts. I don't think that's really going to work. How do you have sports if that's the case? There's 2 big things to take away from Mark Hunt and this Ninth Circuit. 2 things. One, they call it vitiating the contract, or vitiating the consent of the contract, rather. does doping vitiate or basically nullify the consent? Like, I consent to this activity, but he doped, then of course I never consented to that. Does that actually vitiate the consent? But the big problem that he had was the second one, which was that he wasn't really able to effectively argue how it harmed him. Yes, the loss itself harmed him, but he wasn't able to really show that there was like a meaningful material, like the doping aspect of it can be teased out as having caused a series of harms. He wasn't really able to show that, nor that the harm that he suffered from the loss was like uniquely bad by itself. There was really no way either teased out or in aggregate to make a claim about harms. And if you can't make a claim about harms, I'm not really sure what you can make. But like, if you can't dope in sports because it removes the consent, it depends on what they would want to do about that, like as a way to challenge it. But if you imagine, like, you know, guys getting, we'd have to see what kind of remedy they come up with to deal with that. But to me, I understand that, like, oh, I didn't consent to a guy doping, but in previous court rulings, the judge ruled, yes, of course you did. You didn't consent to that, but you consented to that. So, like, among many hazards that you could encounter, including but not limited to in ingesting by accident something, which could also have a performance enhancing effect. You didn't consent to that either, but it could happen. That you consented to, like, essentially the reality of life. But we'll see what they come up with. Trayvon says, is Trump being okay? Now we're going a little far. Elected going to affect the result. Oh, okay. Sorry, I apologize. I take that back. The results of Zuffa versus Johnson. Sort of. If the UFC does join a big streamer, will they leave ESPN? Yes. It could anyway. $80 pay-per-view still a thing or not a part of the new era? I think they won't get rid of it completely, but they might dial it back. The thing about the antitrust is, like, how far are you going to push that in a world where they can appoint different federal judges? I mean, there's one in this particular case, but like beyond him, they might realign further the Supreme Court. You probably already like their case in the Supreme Court. God knows if there was any legislation that could pass between now and then that might have some kind of a pronounced effect. It's not like a one-to-one kind of this affects that, but it creates a general climate where you're like, how much do you really like your chances in a climate where, you know, the reigning government will be hostile to those interests? Probably not a great one. Anthony says, your top 5 pound-for-pound list of best MMA fighters to smoke cigarettes. Praches, Sakuraba, those are two. Jesus, those are great ones. I'm not sure. How many fighters have I ever seen smoke cigarettes? Sean Shirk used to get a second escort into the away from the lobby to get to his room in Vegas so he wouldn't have to inhale the smoke on the floor at the time. That's a good one. Let me think about that. I think Joe Schilling has that famous one, right? What else? You can add him to the list. I feel like I could be wrong about this, but I feel like Kid Yamamoto might have had one. Who would be the last one smoking cigarettes? I'm not sure. I actually would have to. I mean, I have to pull off the top of my head, but that's a great question. Top 5 fighters smoking cigarettes. Yeah, I would throw Joe Schilling in there and maybe Norifumi Yamamoto. Nico says, Carlos Ulberg was offered to be in The Bachelor here in New Zealand. In your expert opinion, such as that exists, who are the top 3 most? Raul Rosas Jr., Nate Landwehr, and I'll say, I don't know. Fucking Bahamondes or something. I don't know. Darcy says, thoughts on a video package for Waterson Gomez and not Stipe? Yeah. His retirement seemed unceremonious. UFC don't let the door hit you. Oh yeah, don't let you. The UFC basically saying don't let the door hit you on the way out. So they're usually good if they don't know you're going to retire. Obviously, there's no way they can do anything. But they had kind of telegraphed this, and in previous instantiations, what you're talking about here with like Waterson Gomez, did a really great job. One theory I heard was that maybe Stipe didn't want it, so they didn't want to do that for him because I think, you know, all things being what they are, he would rather just not be that way. I can believe that. The other one is I've heard that he got sideways with UFC, but they'll bring him back for the Hall of Fame thing. He'll make the Hall of Fame. So there's that as well. It's probably a combination of all of that. I think my guess is that Stipe just was not interested in something like that at that moment. Zach says, hi, Luke. I have an exam coming up, and I'm curious on your tips for preparation and studying. Do a significant amount of it. everyone has like a studying methodology. I haven't studied for a test in quite a long time, so I don't really recall what my methods were. In general, the act of writing on paper is better for your memory than typing in a keyboard or just reading or even hearing something. Sometimes those can be very beneficial, but the act of writing. So I was big on note cards, but these are subject dependent and not by itself like enough to overcome what may be an issue. But just as a general rule, the act of writing pen to paper is better for your brain. Darcy says, Luke, do you have any metrics on whether your live chat YouTube is growing? And do you see it getting to a point where you can financially sustain yourself with just YouTube? Live chat is up and down. Relative to its peak, it is certainly down. But more recently, it's been actually doing pretty good. In terms of overall YouTube, steadily getting there. It's going to take a little while to like again, unfuck the amount of time I let this place sit completely or then partially dormant, which just a gigantic mistake, but it's getting there. It's getting there. It's going to take some time, but I think, talk to me in a year and let's see where we are. I think we're going to be in a better spot by then. Raphael says, do you feel that the fighters who have negative views of Trump or those who have anti-conservative political views will be denied chances in the UFC? Unlikely, especially if they're good. If they're really good, they're going to want to see them. By the way, I know of several UFC executives who are anti-Trump, but they just do their job. I suspect if a fighter does his job, they'll be the same. Apoplectic Spock, is it safe to assume Armenian girls have beer? Okay, let me be a little weird here. This donk, whose name I cannot pronounce. Luke, how do you think a prime Dillashaw would do against the current? We discussed this one previously. I forgot exactly what I said, but he would do well. But I think he would do well. He would do well. I think he could win a title. A prime Dillashaw. Do you guys see he can't even lift his shoulder? Recall everything I said when he went out there against Aljamain Sterling, shit the bed, because of course he did. His arm was in terrible condition, his shoulder, I should say. And I said he is going to have lifelong complications from how bad he's fucked this up. My left shoulder was repaired in May of 2009, and it is good, but it's not great. And it has also caused imbalances now on this shoulder. I actually tweeted yesterday that I was in the TikTok shop and I bought this like cheap ass, like $160 pull down and then rowing machine. And people were like, just do pull-ups. I'm like, guys, do you know how much warm-up I have to do before I can get to that? Like, no, my shoulders are a disaster. They're a disaster. So that's not even a thing for me. He can't even raise. He can't do this. He can't do this. He's like this. It's not even a function of pain. He said it just doesn't work. This is what I meant when I said he should not have been fighting out there. It was you gotta let these guys tough. You gotta let them figure it out. Fuck that. Fuck that. Either you can fight or you can't. And he could not. It was a gigantic mistake. Costly one at that. Shenanigans. Have you rewatched Taylor Serrano without commentary? I've not. Do you agree or disagree? Oh, yes, one time, but I rewatched it, but not with commentary. Oh, so I misunderstood you. I apologize. I thought you meant, have you rewatched it with commentary? I misunderstood the question. Let me go. You guys asked me to slow down one time before. Let me do it again. Have you rewatched Taylor Serrano without commentary? Yes. Do you agree or disagree with the judges' scorecards? Yes. Having seen that again, I thought Serrano won. I'm going to say it again, dude. I think it's the body punching. The stats are obviously eye-catching, but to me, it's the body punching is the issue. Greg says, hola, Luke. Tell us what your ideal Thanksgiving dinner spread is like, assuming there's no live chat. There will be one next Wednesday. Happy early turkey day to you, the fam, and Othello. Manos Arriba. Ideal. Mac and cheese, good turkey fried, good gravy. I like an acidic salad. You know what I mean? I like cheese and like some prosciutto and other like a charcuterie board to start. I used to like to drink. I don't drink much anymore, but that used to be a big component of it. And then, obviously some kind of potato dish. That's good enough for me. And then I want like a really good dessert. I don't have I'm not one of these guys who's like, you got to get grandma's green bean casserole. Like grandma's green bean casserole tastes like shit. No, I want like good food, and it doesn't have to be a ton. I just make it nice. Chase says, is it crazy to say that Jon is right and Tom needs him more than vice versa? Yes, of course it is. I kind of agree. Tom needs Jon for unification, the biggest payday. Yeah, all the more reason why the belt holder should give him the opportunity. Can you imagine Shogun being like, I'm not going to fight this fucking bitch. I'm not like, you imagine that? He gave him the opportunity. That's how the fight game works. The reigning power constantly gives the emerging power a shot at becoming the reigning power. But if you never get that shot, you can never be in that same place. So saying that is true. It's true. He does need Jon more than Jon needs him. That's absolutely true. But that's also the point. That's why you make the fight. And the reason why it is that way is because you're denying him a shot at being more than he is. So, a silly argument. Justify people hating Chandler because he's fake and loving Jones. They both put on entertaining fights. I'm not justifying it, except to say I'm noticing it. But also the fact that he has engaged in so many behaviors that are, fence grabbing, eye poking. It's a lot at this point. Johnston says, does Jon fight on post Aspinall if he were to win in your eyes? No, absolutely not. Well, at that point, that would truly be a waste of his time. Dude, you beat Aspinall, you can do whatever the fuck you want. I mean, I'm telling you, if Jon beats him, it is an absolutely closed argument over who is the best all time. It'd be him, period. Conor says, Luke, I have an AMI title fight at 155. I'm a 45er this Saturday. Any words of wisdom for dealing with the pressure? The old adage, like, it's okay to have butterflies as long as the butterflies fly in formation. But don't hide from the pressure. Accept it. Work with it, trust your training, and execute on the game plan. Like, don't try to not feel things. Feel them. Let them work with you. For a winning parlay, bet often on Mbappe. Not this season. Lewis says, why was the ref telling Jake not to measure? He was reaching out to gauge distance, and the ref told him not to measure. I don't know. I didn't hear that fight with commentary. I don't know. I missed that part. Alex says, rank the following in terms of biggest Canelo hater. RJJ, Andre Ward, and Tim Bradley. I'll go Ward, Bradley, RJJ. But Ward is different. Ward, it's a competitive rivalry there to an extent anyway. Esam says, thoughts on these dudes that spend $18,000 to go through a 3-day fake boot camp in hopes of becoming a real man? How much would you charge to yell at donks with too much money and shitty self-esteem? You guys can pay me a lot of money for that. I understand what they're looking for. They're looking to be pushed to points that they are not physically capable of telling themselves to do it, but under duress they can go. And then through that, and then the difficulties that are required to reach those experiences, they can feel a certain way about themselves. I understand that. But they're not really... They can make, I tend to think that those kinds of things can probably make you feel a little bit better about yourself. They might be able to do a little bit of healing, a little bit of change in how you self-perceive, but that has to be done over a sustained period of time to change, not like intense, crazy boot camp, but these kinds of environments that, like, where they come from. Like, why does boot camp put you through that? Because they're trying to train you for war. They're trying to get you for ready for worst case scenario. It's that training that gets you basically ready, and then everything else that comes behind it, and then including the actual experience of being in country and everything else deployed and whatnot. Those are those experiences that can change who you are, like the longitudinal nature of it. It's when it's compact into a thing. It's like you're going to get something out of that. I do believe that, actually. I do think you can get that. But it's a shortcut to a thing that just isn't lasting. You have to change your life. You can't survive necessarily something that you're paying to do to yourself and change yourself. You have to change your life. And they're trying to shortcut that. And so they're only going to get a small portion of the benefit. This gentleman says, why don't analysts discuss positioning or footwork that we do all the time? Pereira's incredible balance and positioning make him hard to take down, but they only talk about his power and size. His bad wrestling makes him easy to take down. Easy is a relative term. Illia has the best positioning by far. That is true. You're a top man. Well, I appreciate that. I certainly agree about Illia. His positioning, his balance. And Pereira has good balance, although he bounces a little bit more as well. Not always, but a little bit more. But we talk about footwork and balance all the time, and I agree that makes him a much better striker. It makes him, I think, better overall. Good balance transfers so many different places, right? Having a good sense of balance. But he's definitely got some takedown defensive issues. Sparcific, what is the expiry date on Power Slap? It can survive as like a zombie organization for quite some time. The UFC getting into jiu-jitsu to me is actually interesting because if they can put their effort there and like let Power Slap just go do something else and die, sell it off to somebody else and be done with it, I'd be very happy about that. I would be really supportive of what the UFC want to do. I mean, at this point, nothing's going to change their lock on the market. David says, I know Dana has said they will never co-promote, but do you think the PFL? No, they cannot make a campaign to make PF Ngannou Jones. No. Why so angry, Luke? Chill. It's a nice Thursday. I'm good. This gentleman, what's the Israel issue? Bad views. I don't want to get into it, but basically, oh, Jesus, I don't want to do this shit again. I didn't like the way I handled it the first time. I don't want to do it again. Just try to learn as much about the guy as you can is the best way I can say it. Chris says, 2025 has to, on its surface, appear to be one of the murkiest for what's next in MMA as far as divisions and contenders are concerned. I'd also say for the health of the boxing business. 2023 was a huge year, but a lot changed behind the scenes that some of which you saw, like Paramount getting out of the business. They're not the only ones that I'm hearing that might be getting out of the business. So I think boxing had a really strong 2023 and a good start to 2024. But 2025, we're going to see. We're going to see. Shine says, I love UFC. Been a fan for years, but can't stand how far right they've swung and what they do with Trump events. There's a million of these guys, and 500,000 of them have already left. Johnston says, wishing you the happiest of Thanksgivings next week and continue healing for Barbas. Yeah, thank you, bros. I appreciate you very much. Michael says, Luke, I joined late, so I don't know if it was brought up. On Monday, UNBC kept talking about audio issues when it came through fine. So for some reason, the Jones clips that we played on Monday's show, they would play for like 3 seconds, and then it would just kind of die out and go. And so we're like, well, what the fuck? We couldn't hear anything. But I guess you guys could. It's weird. Some stuff will go to the audience, and some stuff will go to the audience and us. We got 3 seconds of the Jones clips, and then they died. I don't know what happened. Benito says, illegal immigration, racial discrimination, college, employment, and grants, as well as 2 new wars aren't in my interest. With those in mind, well, this current party, I mean, I don't have much to sell you on them. The racial discrimination college is a fake issue, and you guys all know it's a fake issue. Certainly, I would argue, probably not in the same way that you would, that our immigration system is in need of reform. I would certainly agree with that, but that was true pre-2019. That was true pre-2016, and we've really done nothing to actually meaningfully fix it. What else did you pick? Employment. Employment is bad, I'll grant. What was the other one? And grants and 2 new wars. Oh yeah, I won't defend that at all. Like, no. But the problem is thinking that the guy coming in is like going to fix these is just, y'all want to learn the hard way. Okay. Alex, LT's live chat versus Campbell's Rambles head to head next Wednesday. We will be there. Oh, he's doing it on Wednesday? Well, then I don't want to go head to head with him. Maybe I'll do it Tuesday or something. I don't want to fuck with him. So I don't want to do that. But okay. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. I appreciate everyone who's been a member. I appreciate everyone who asked questions, whether you're mad at me or not, whether you like the chat or not. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. Let's see. Might do a watch along on Saturday. On Saturday morning for what you call it, for Figgy and Piotr Jan. I might do one there. We'll see how this goes. But either way, thank you guys so much for watching. I greatly appreciate it. Morning Combat live at 11 a.m. tomorrow. Don't miss it. Love y'all. And until next time, y'all know the drill. Stay frosty.